You're in a meeting. Someone just stole your idea, and you can't even prove it. They didn't steal it loudly. They did it softly. They said, building on what we were discussing, and then repeated your thoughts back to the group, word for word, but with a slight adjustment in tone that made it sound like the concept originated with them. You feel it immediately, that cold flicker of recognition. But before you can speak, they glance at you, just for a second. And in that glance, there's something almost apologetic, almost innocent. It's so fast you question whether it happened at all. And now, if you say something, you look paranoid. You look like the one causing problems. This is the opening move in a game most people don't even know they're playing. A game where the rules are never stated, but the penalties for not knowing them are paid in silence, in frustration, and in the slow erosion of your own certainty. We tend to think of control as something obvious, overt, a raised voice, a direct order, a locked door. But those are the clumsy tools of people who have no finesse. Real control, the kind that actually works, doesn't need to raise its voice. It operates in the space between what is said and what is implied. It lives in the pause, the glance, the well-timed sigh. And once you learn to see it, you realize it's happening far more often than you ever imagined. Let's look at the first mechanism. Psychologists call it gaslighting, but that term has become so overused it's lost its teeth. So let's strip it back to its raw function. At its core, this is about the manipulation of memory and perception. But the subtle version doesn't involve grand conspiracies or denying reality in dramatic ways. It's smaller. It's saying, "I never said that," when you both know they did. It's the confused head tilt when you express frustration about something they did yesterday, followed by, "I think you might be remembering that wrong." Here's the psychological hook. Your brain is wired for social coherence. You want to believe that the people around you are operating in good faith. So when someone gently challenges your recollection, your brain does something interesting. It hesitates, and in that hesitation, a tiny crack appears. You start to wonder, just for a moment, if maybe you did misremember. Maybe you are being too sensitive. The metaphor here is a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice it while driving. The car feels fine, but over time, the pressure drops. Eventually, you're riding on the rim, and you have no idea when it actually started. That's what this does to your confidence. It doesn't shatter it all at once. It just lets a little air out, day after day, until you're no longer sure if you can trust your own gauge. Imagine a scenario. Two friends, Maya and Chloe, are planning a weekend trip. Chloe suggests a specific hotel. Maya agrees. A week later, Chloe books a different hotel and tells Maya, "I know we talked about it, but you said you were open to other options, right?" Maya doesn't remember saying that. But Chloe looks so sincere, so confident. Maya shrugs it off. It's just a hotel. But something small has shifted. Maya's reality has been gently edited, and she let it happen because the cost of fighting it felt higher than the cost of accepting it. That's the math these dynamics rely on. But control isn't just about rewriting the past. It's about engineering the future. And one of the most effective ways to engineer someone's future behavior is to first destabilize their emotional state. This brings us to the second mechanism, intermittent reinforcement combined with status shifts. In any relationship, there is an invisible hierarchy. It shifts depending on context, expertise, or social capital. But some people have a knack for making these shifts work in their favor consistently. They do this by alternating between warmth and withdrawal. Think about a colleague named David. On Monday, he's your biggest supporter in the room. He laughs at your jokes, nods enthusiastically when you speak, pulls you aside afterward to say, "That was really insightful." You feel seen. You feel valued. The status between you feels equal, maybe even slightly tilted in your favor. Then comes Wednesday. You pass him in the hallway. You say hello. He glances at you, gives a tiny nod, and keeps walking. No warmth. No connection. You replay the last 2 days in your head. Did you do something wrong? Was it something you said? You can't find anything. But the feeling lingers. You start to wonder if you misread the Monday interaction. Maybe he was just being polite. Maybe you aren't as valued as you thought. Here's what's actually happening. David isn't reacting to anything you did. He's executing a pattern. He gives warmth to pull you in, then withdraws to create uncertainty. And uncertainty is a powerful engine. It keeps your mind looped on him. You start adjusting your behavior, hoping to get back to the warmth. You become more agreeable, more attentive. You're not even aware you're doing it. You just want to resolve the tension. This taps into a deep evolutionary mechanism. Social belonging was once a matter of life and death. Being cast out from the tribe meant exposure, starvation, death. Your brain still treats social rejection with the same urgency it once reserved for physical threats. So when someone you thought was an ally suddenly turns cold, your brain goes into high alert. It doesn't tell you, this is a manipulation tactic. It tells you, fix this. Get back in their good graces. Survive. This is where the mid-video rehook lands. Because here's what most people don't realize. This dynamic doesn't just play out between obvious manipulators and their victims. It plays out between people who genuinely care about each other. It's often unconscious. The person doing it may not even realize they're doing it. They've simply learned through years of conditioning that this pattern works. It gets them what they want. It keeps people close. It maintains their position, and that makes it harder to spot. Because if the person isn't a villain, if they're your friend, your partner, your parent, then how can this be control? But control doesn't require malice. It only requires a pattern that consistently shifts another person's behavior to align with someone else's unspoken needs. Let's escalate further. There's a third mechanism. It's called future pacing and assumptive language. This is when someone speaks as if a future decision has already been made without ever explicitly asking for your consent. A classic example. A friend says, so when we go to the concert next month, we should definitely get dinner at that place you like. Sounds harmless. Sounds like they're being considerate even. But notice what just happened. They assumed you're going to the concert. They assumed you're going together. They assumed the plan. You haven't agreed to any of it. But now, if you try to say, actually, I'm not sure I can make it, you're the one breaking the plan. You're the one creating friction. You're the one who has to explain yourself. The assumptive language frames the choice as already made. Your only remaining role is to go along with it, or become the source of conflict. And most people will choose to go along simply to avoid the awkwardness of correcting something that was presented as a certainty. This works because of a cognitive bias called the default effect. Humans tend to stick with the path of least resistance. If a course of action is presented as the default, we're far more likely to accept it than to actively choose a different one. So when someone frames their preference as the assumed reality, they're exploiting this bias. They're making you choose to opt out rather than opt in. And opting out requires energy, confidence, and a willingness to disrupt social harmony. Most days, you just don't have that energy. But here's the paradox hiding underneath all of this. The more you try to resist control, the more vulnerable you can become to it. Let's explain that. When you start to recognize these patterns, a natural reaction is to build walls, to become guarded, to question everyone's motives. And this is where a second, more yin-bi layer of control can emerge. Because now the other person can position themselves as the victim of your suspicion. They can say, "Why are you so defensive? I'm just trying to help." And suddenly, you're the one who looks difficult. You're the one who looks paranoid. You're the one who needs to apologize. This is a classic reversal. It takes your legitimate awareness and reframes it as a character flaw. The person who was subtly controlling the dynamic now gets to play the role of the misunderstood friend, the patient colleague, the one who puts up with your trust issues. And you're left holding the bag, wondering if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you are reading into things. This is the deepest layer. Control is most effective when it makes you question not just your memory, but your own instincts. When it makes you doubt the very tools you'd use to defend yourself. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a question that doesn't have a clean answer. How do you navigate a world where control can be so subtle you're not even sure it's happening? The first step isn't confrontation, it's recognition. It's the quiet ability to sit in a moment and observe the dynamic without immediately reacting. To notice the assumptive language, to feel the status shift, to see the glance that doesn't match the words. And in that moment, you have a choice. You don't have to accuse. You don't have to fight. You just have to pause. That pause is powerful. It breaks the rhythm. It introduces a beat of silence that the other person didn't expect. And in that silence, you reclaim something small but essential. You reclaim the right to decide for yourself what just happened. You don't need to prove it to anyone. You just need to see it. Because once you see it, you're no longer just reacting. You're observing. And observation is the one space where control cannot reach you. Here's something worth sitting with. If you look back at the moments where you felt most frustrated, most drained, most confused by someone's behavior, how many of those moments were actually about what they did? And how many were about the slow, quiet erosion of your own certainty? The answer might tell you more than any label ever could.